Yeah, welcome to the slab, Chaz.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
Do you still go by
Fantastic.
do you still
This is
go by Chaz?
absolutely fantastic. Highlight of my week. So,
I believe you.
yeah.
Um, do you still go by Chaz despite the negative
The
political?
Seattle thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to take ownership of that. I'm not going to, like, the Hawaii Rainbows. Remember they had to change to the Hawaii Warriors?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
they were the Rainbow Warriors first.
right. But they
Then they were
kind
just
of
the
had to
Warriors.
change for obvious reasons. But I think, I'm going to stick with it. It's a fine nickname. Um, Charles is a bit too formal. Charlie is.
Your dad calls you Charlie.
Yeah, it's too. It's out of a Dickens novel. I don't.
When I heard that they changed it from the Chaz, I can't even say it. When I heard they changed it from the Chaz to the
The
Chop.
chop. Oh, I'm praying that it stays chop.
Yeah, I mean, it's like your whole identity is wrapped up. I mean, that's one of those things where not only would it would it not only would it rewire what everybody thinks of the word Chaz, but it's a negative connotation.
Well, I was watching one of the news stations, and they had a guy on, and the guy was like, "Yeah, I want a name, Chaz. It's like a bad '80s rock band or something." And I'm like watching the TV, and I'm like, "My God, now it's terrible."
Yeah,
So
I knew a girl named Siri, out in
I
Los
have a cousin
Angeles.
named Siri.
Yeah, it's a Norwegian name, right? It's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
yeah, and Tell's got a daughter named Siri. So whatever. But I knew Siri out in L.A. and then of course Siri came around, and it was like it changes the whole world. It's like if you're going to be associated with something, you'd like it to be maybe positive or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
now that you're Chaz, I don't I didn't know if I could call you that or if you were concerned a little bit
I
about.
think it's fine. I'm not going to let some anarchists in Seattle and their 4 block square ruin my life. So,
But I think it's coming to an end. I read today, right? They finally decided to go in because there's been a murder, and now that I guess since there's a murder, some sort of line has now been drawn where they feel like they can go in and try to break up what's going on there.
um, I guess, I don't know. If I lived in that area or had a business, I would be pretty concerned. But
Can you fucking imagine? I mean, and not that things shouldn't be disrupted to some degree every now and then, and not that not that everything maybe isn't grounds to be reviewed, but can you imagine you own a property in that area or a business, like you said, and now that's your reality? I mean, what the fuck? I mean, what the fuck?
well,
That's reality for these people, Chuck.
yeah, and you're a law-abiding citizen, so you are going to bank on the authorities to do something, and they're not going to do anything. So what do? Stand by there and watch your business burn? I mean, I don't know what the options are. You go out there and you try to defend it yourself, and you get hurt or you hurt them, and then you get prosecuted, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, it's like it reverts back to some sort of primal survival instincts. But even then, you're too civilized to be sort of operating on that intellectual plane, where it's like this killer, this killer be killed concept or whatever. It's
we're,
so
we're 200 plus years removed from that.
right. So it's like,
I'm not out on, like, I was, when I read the presidential bios of these founding fathers, and, like, Western Virginia or West Virginia was the frontier, and, like, there were no rules,
right, right. So just think about like in terms of just think about our social evolution, think about our biological evolution since then. I mean, it's so easy to say, oh, we'll revert back to some sort of like primal instinct to survive. It's like, no, we pay $6 for Starbucks 4 days a week. Like we're not really wired to defend our property.
no,
The majority of us.
no. There
I
are
mean, there's
some people out there who are, like, I think, going like this and waiting to exercise their Second Amendment rights, but that's equally, misplaced.
I
I
have a
don't
hard,
want to have to go out there and have to physically defend my property. That's why I mean, I was thinking about this when we were talking, and I was thinking about things we might be talking about, and I knew this kind of issue would come up, and the police and all that, and I thought about, why do we have police forces to begin with, right? Like, they weren't always around, and I think people realize that it's too much time and energy for me to protect my farm and my mill where I go to work in the village every day. I got an idea. Why don't we all pool our money together and we'll hire a trained force to go do this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Because I do have a right. I think everyone has a fundamental right to certainly defend themselves and their property that they own.
Right.
And
I don't know a whole lot about the origin of organized law enforcement. Do you? I mean, I would consider you to be an expert almost. I mean, no, I wasn't going to say on that, but as far as my circle of friends and even people I know sort of on the periphery, like you're a historian by the standards that, in terms
by District 281 softball standards, the leading authority.
Thank you.
On,
I couldn't say it better myself. Yes, exactly. But I do in my head always think that you have like some sort, like at least like a rudimentary understanding of even like really obscure like history. So I thought maybe, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know anything about the origins of organized.
No, I saw something. I think they're the early 19th century, 1820s or something like that. I think it's, started in England. Obviously, when you have high density, areas, that's where you're gonna have problems. I think if you're on the frontier in West Virginia and there's some murder around, I think people just took law into their own hands.
Yeah, I thought it was like Wyatt Earp and Tombstone. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think people are prepared for this. I don't know how we're gonna react. I know a friend of ours I saw on Facebook who went to high school with was at a local Target here, and there were teenage kids throwing rocks at people as they were leaving the store.
Okay.
How do you deal with that?
Well,
I mean, do you fight back? Do you get in your car and get pelted? And do you call get on your $700 phone and call the police? I don't know. What do you do?
I don't think that they're responding to things like that. So you don't have much you can do. I mean,
right.
A, you're probably outnumbered if you're by yourself at Target, right?
Right.
B, you're not carrying a pocket full of stones, so it's not an eye for an eye situation.
Right. And if you try to do something, someone's going to catch the last half of it on their phone, and it's going to be you pummeling a 15-year-old kid.
With a photoshopped mega hat on your head.
Right. They're going to find out where you are, and your house is going to burn. So.
They're going to see you're a registered Republican. I mean, we joke about it, but there is something really disconcerting about our total disregard for context and sort of any kind of rational, objective, middle road truth. It doesn't seem like it exists anymore in any form. Or if it does, you've got to search really hard to find it, and nobody's really interested in hearing it. It's like, it wasn't that long ago that would just be considered outlandish without any debate, any argument, any social media post. Chuck got pelted with stones walking out of Target, and everyone would be like, "That's absurd. That's sad. What have we?" But now it's probably 50-50, Chuck, at best. It probably is 50-50 at best in terms of what kind of support you would have. Well, and it would be, of course, divided along racial lines, right?
Right. Racial, or I mean, at worst, if this happened 10 years ago, it would be a debate about mental illness versus like bad parenting. You'd have that debate. Like, why did they do this? Right. Well, clearly, you'd say, well, they're just jerks, and they're, maybe they had a bad upbringing or whatever. Then someone would say, no, it's about video games and all that. And now it's just like, no, it's okay. Yeah. They're justified in it. And then you got to be kidding me, right?
Yeah, and these, some of these kids are, and I talked about this with my dad. I did a podcast with my dad on Sunday, and we talked about all this stuff. And it's like there's a million different mindsets. You look out at those gatherings, those protests, and it's like you have some peaceful protesters that this is like an expression of their frustration. Then you have hired, violent antagonists. Then you have a bunch of kids who've been on quarantine and cooped up and haven't even been able to see their friends. Who this is like riot palooza. It's like literally, let's go out and have a good time and fucking capture some of this. This is we understand that this is history in the making. We want to be there for it.
Why would you punch a dummy bag in the basement to take out your aggression when you can go take down a Wendy's, and you won't get caught? So.
Right, and also that's the point. That's the point I was getting.
Because it's so absurd, like are we really experiencing this?
I know, it's surreal. It seems fictional. It seems like a script. It seems like you're a movie guy. It seems like something that some of these filmmakers wouldn't even dream up, and the craziest ones. It seems that fictional, but it's what's going on. And I don't know. To me, there's a lot of different mindsets. A lot of these kids feel empowered and feel invincible because they can play the race card. I mean, if you remember, I think it was like a year ago, there was a video shot at a Chipotle where these kids who were, I think they were Somalian, they were essentially harassing the manager, and the video got out and the manager was fired. And eventually the truth, right? Because
Yeah.
the truth is way behind what we all see nowadays. Eventually the truth was like, these were repeat customers who were always going in and demanding free food, and if they didn't get it, were playing the race card. And I think the manager ended up getting their job back. And if my memory serves me correctly, I'm sure someone will call me out on being inaccurate here on some level. But it's my point in bringing that up is like there is an element of this where it's like people are capitalizing on what they realize is absurdity. They realize the absurdity, but it's like, who's going to fuck with us? We're invincible. It's almost, you know what it almost is? And I know I got to be careful with my words, but it's almost like the bad apple cop mentality that we're talking about on the other side. It's like this idea that you're above the law because of your badge and your uniform. You can sort of impose your own values on the situation and get away with just about anything. It's kind of that mindset.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I think these people are smarter than we think. And I think you're a fool if you buy into that. I'll tell them what they want to hear, about subjugating myself to whatever. And then that will ease their pain, or whoever's pain we're talking about. And it doesn't. You're just you've been made into a subordinate.
Yeah, it's interesting. And
that's the goal. The goal is not to achieve any sort of harmony. The goal is to put you in your place and let me do what I want.
So. But it's disguised as a desire for harmony and equality. That's what's so dangerous about it. So if you don't think beyond what you're being sold, right? If you don't ask follow-up questions, it's like if I just go to the car lot and I trust the guy with pit stains and that beer belly and he's telling me the car is, oh yeah, well yeah, it's up to date on everything. This thing is good for another 100,000 miles. Trust me. If we are operating in that headspace, yeah, well then you can just buy into what you're being told, but you've got to get to a next level and challenge what you're being told and go, okay, what's the bigger picture here? And by the way, you don't have to dismiss the idea that there's systemic racism to ask a follow-up question. That's the weird, tricky quicksand that we're in right now. Is like you're not really able to challenge, and it's not even a challenge, ask follow-up questions. You're not allowed to ask a follow-up question that generates some critical thought without you immediately being labeled as part of the white privilege movement, or
right.
worse, or worse.
Right. I guess to my point, no one's interested in a quote dialogue. It's shut up now and listen. And what bothers me about all of this is lost in all of this. You talked about is this idea we can't see truth anymore. Where's our sense of like objective right and wrong, or virtue, or you'd think, I mean, that's to me the basis of a civilized society, is this idea that there are certain things that are just right and wrong and virtuous, and kindness should be honored, courage should be honored. Cowards are never revered in any society, and you have to do what's right. And sometimes, like the whole idea of the customer's always right. No, right is always right. And people are afraid to stick up for what's right, what's true, even if it means that they lose everything, whether it's an election, a job. And you can be sympathetic to someone else's point of view and say, I just disagree with you. And, explain to me these things right here. These are the problems I have. And you can't even begin to have that conversation. You will be labeled a racist or misogynistic or homophobic or xenophobic. So you think there's an objective right? You think that it's not up for debate what's right or not? Is that a fundamental sort of religious perspective, or you think just philosophically speaking there is an objective
right, and I mean right, wrong, not
Both.
right,
The answer's
left.
both. And that doesn't mean it's easy to find, and it doesn't mean sometimes you won't ever find it. But I do
Yeah, but how
believe.
do you so when you say that right is right, aren't you kind of making the assumption that it's almost inherent or instinctive?
I do
Um,
believe. I do believe it's written on the hearts of men. I do
okay, so
believe
it's a
that.
religious reference, is what you're saying.
Not necessarily religious. It's and I think C.S. Lewis, I think, wrote a book about this called The Tao or something. All faiths share it. This idea of an inherent sense of right and wrong. That there's just things that you just don't do. You don't take what's not yours.
But don't
Everybody
you?
knows that.
Okay,
I mean, a toddler knows that.
yes. Well, a toddler learns that. Don't you think a toddler learns that? That's part of what parenting does. I would almost argue that if it's not rewarded as a positive act or a virtuous act or punished as a non-virtuous
They,
act,
they,
that but don't
Sorry,
you
go ahead.
think no, but don't you think, I mean, and what I'm getting at here is I think part of what's happened is there's a reward for throwing stones at a white person if you are a minority or person of color and with a group of friends. There isn't the universal backlash that would immediately define that act as inhumane, immoral, uh, uh, unnecessary. Wherever on the
Right,
scale.
because those are values. Inhumanity, it's unnecessary. It's arbitrary. All those things that just are so shocking to us have taken a back seat to the greater value, which is racial equity,
Okay.
gender equity. The equity is the key. That's the driving value these days.
Yeah, I would almost argue that it's the perception of equity. I don't even think that's the goal, and that's like what we talked about. I think that's a farce. There might be some people that are really interested in equality, whether it's equal opportunity or equal outcome. That's person by person up for debate. But I actually think it's a little bit of a disguise for revenge and restitution. And I'm not even saying that's wrong. I'm just saying I think that's what it is. It's like there so many. I don't even know if I can say black people are African American because I heard black's the right way to say it now. Like African American is offensive to Caribbean blacks, so I don't really know what the right way to say it is.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of black people have grown up with stories passed down of really extreme oppression and extreme abuse, and they're true stories. And there's a lot of bitterness and resentment um, that they have to be a part of a family tree that has been marginalized because of these things that have gone on. And so this idea of equality, or Mark Holder likes to use the word equity. To me, it's like I don't really feel like that's what we're after. If we were after that, I think you'd see a lot more harmony. Because do you know anybody who's against that? I'm not necessarily for equal outcomes, because then you're turning us into robots. But for sure, everybody should have equal opportunity, and we should do the things that we have to do to make that possible, especially for young people in terms of access to education and things like that. But I don't feel like there'd be this much discord if it was really about equality.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree. I think that what's pushing this is, I think I look at it as like, do we want to land the Apollo 13 spacecraft? Right? Let's forget about ideology. We need to get this thing back to planet Earth. What's the best social program to put in? What are good policies that work? And I think there are people who are motivated by that, and there are other people who are motivated by, no, I don't want, this Western civilization, capitalist, suburban life. I don't want it.
Right.
No, I want my revenge.
Revenge is
So,
a strong word, because I don't think anybody will be on board with calling it revenge. But there
well,
is reparations is kind of like payback, right? I mean, isn't that literally payback? I mean, I think that's what this is about. It's payback.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak for black people on what they want or what their motives are.
Right.
I can only speak to what they say they desire, and there's a lot of problems in the black community, particularly here right now. I don't have the answers for that. What I don't like is being shut down and discussing these things because of my background, and then being told like I'm in kindergarten to just sit down and shut up and listen and learn. Yeah. And I that is just, we grew up in Robbinsdale. We didn't grow up in Wayzata. And I remember I posted something on Facebook. I love it when people who go to, who live in Chanhassen and go to Minnetonka High School are lecturing me about race relations. I always found that curious. Not that we grew up in like the hood, but it was as integrated as one could be in the 1980s. This was more integrated. Certainly more integrated than Benilde St. Margaret's when I went there for junior high and going to Lake Minnetonka for homecoming.
Right.
But the idea of, privilege, it paints every single person who's not of color. And remember, when you mean not of color, it's a straight white male. That's everyone's target, right? That's the target.
That is the target.
Everyone's going at, because we oppress everybody.
Yep.
It doesn't matter that we're the target. So we've got it easy. And then I think about things in my own life and where I come from and where my parents came from, my grandparents. And it's like, you just say, screw you, man. You don't know my life. You don't know what we went through. The good decisions people made, the bad decisions people made, what we had to, everyone's got a story. And when you paint a broad stroke that you're white and you just got to listen, you're like, no, I don't.
Yeah, it puts us in a really weird position. It's a really, and I guarantee nobody feels bad that it puts us in a weird position at all, which makes it an even weirder position because there isn't anybody who gives a shit that it puts you in a weird position. In fact, there's probably a lot of like inner celebration going on that we are feeling uncomfortable. But it puts us in a weird position to have to sort of like defend ourselves, but we're being told that we don't even understand racism in a way that we could even address it. We can't address it because we're blind to it.
I don't understand it. We were talking to my parents, my dad had his 86th birthday, and we were talking about these issues because if you're not talking about these issues, then you're living under a rock. But we talked about, my dad went down to Florida in the 1960s, pre-civil rights, and he was in some southern state, and this woman they went into a cafe to order something, and, they can tell a Yankee, out of nowhere. And the lady at the counter said, like, nope, she's on the phone. She's like, nope, they're not causing any problems. They're just ordering. And my dad's like, well, that was weird. But that was the whole Mississippi burning and the
Right.
The Northerners coming down to be activists and start things up. And my dad's like, yeah, it was absolutely surreal. And when we talked about this, I mean, can you fathom not being able to wash your hands in the same sink as somebody based on the color of their skin?
No, I cannot.
I mean, it's mind-boggling.
And I can't imagine what kind of trickle-down effect it would have on my psyche, my self-confidence, and all. And by the way, my kids and their kids. And that's what we're talking about. And I understand that as much as I can understand that. I understand it.
And I get it. The idea that, okay, so you were brought over here and treated as a piece of property. Then you were released and everyone hates you. And then you have these laws where you can't go to schools and you can't use separate bathrooms and all that. We were planning to put people on the moon, right? The collective scientific community was planning to put people on the moon, and we're not allowing blacks to use the same bathroom as somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big dichotomy in like thought, right? And to sit there and say, as many conservatives do, well, it's over now. They passed the law, and you should just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and figure the shit out. And it's like
that's unrealistic. That's unrealistic. And we're seeing it play out, that it's not something that's realistic. It's not.
But I think the problem lies in the general sense of, okay, you're right. You shouldn't, we can't just have this Ayn Rand social Darwinistic point of view that says, hey, we've treated you like crap for, 200 years. Oh, here's your opportunity. Go try to get into Harvard now.
Right.
So I think that some of those programs were good. I'm not necessarily, I don't want to bring up affirmative action, but there is something to be said about a young black man in the inner city who scores say 1,200 on his SAT, which is a pretty good score, and allowing him into an elite school where the average SAT is a 1,400 because he didn't have the means to take the Kaplan test prep and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know anybody who's arguing against that.
There are some hardcore right wingers who are like, well, you're taking the spot of someone else who earned it. It's one spot out of 5,000 undergrads.
I personally don't know anybody with that perspective. And if they have it, they keep it real quiet. But I just don't know anybody who feels that way about it. I think there's just this idea that
I think that there's this animosity though towards anything now that's rooted out of that system, the America, Western civilization, whatever. And I place the blame on what I would call white liberals who are indoctrinating largely white kids into feeling guilty and shameful about the United States of America and not saying, okay, maybe some Southerners treated these people poorly. Let's implement some policies that help them along the way. Let's do these things.
Let's educate.
But let's keep the virtue, right? That we have to, that we think you'd educate people on. Like, okay, getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning is still a good thing no matter where you come from. And there are certain things that are just universal and timeless. A work ethic is a work ethic. You watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan. I can't believe the guy, his work ethic was like that. I had no idea. I thought he was just like wickedly talented. I had no idea he pushed everyone that hard.
Right.
So these things are universal truths that have been lost on society. Education doesn't teach virtue. I was looking at the cardinal virtues, which are the Greek virtues: temperance, justice, courage, and prudence, wisdom. Are those taught? The idea of living a virtuous life, is that taught, or is it living a ambitious life or a authentic life? Or, that's my big issue with it is, yeah, there's been huge problems. We're slowly making our way out of it. But when you erode the good things that America stands for or has stood for, it's just chaos. So.
Yeah, those are foundational things, right? And to use the construction analogy, because I restore barns, it's like you start eroding, foundation blocks, and you got real problems. Because
when you start looking at when having a work ethic becomes, something
aggro.
When that becomes something that is like indicative of being white,
or aggro, or aggressive, or toxic, or yeah. I mean that's
now you have a very serious cultural problem on your hands.
Yeah.
When virtuous living, doing the right thing, when the nuclear family, mommy and daddy and kids, is now a quote Western construct, as has been said by some of these radical groups, now you have a very serious problem. I mean, I don't know. There's no getting around it. It's not like we're debating about a 39.6 versus a 35% marginal tax rate. I mean, those are the classic 1980s battles of the Democrats versus the Republicans.
You are good at debating that, by the way.
Well, it's all academic. I mean, it's $4,600 extra on every $100,000 you make. That's the deal. It's 4 percentage points.
So, how do you see this playing out? Not that you have any insight or anything, but I'm always curious. The smartest friends and acquaintances I have, I'm always curious to hear what they think how it's gonna play out, because nobody saw this coming, so I don't think anybody could lay it out exactly the way it's gonna go. But it feels catastrophic to me, Chuck. It feels.
I've always been saying this was in the this is pre-Trump, that we're in the beginnings of a cold civil war. And what I mean by that is, with social media, people are obviously pretty polarized. You're going to start finding out that corporations are going to take sides politically. Republicans will shop at Walmart exclusively. Democrats will shop at Target exclusively. You won't interact. There won't be any, you'll segregate along political lines as opposed to economic lines. And so I think we're there. I think people are just fed up. And is the city going to burn? No, I think there are plenty of people who live in the city and who live in some of these, towns run by the left, where at the end of the day, they still want to save their home on Lake of the Isles.
But you know what, though? Those people aren't really willing to fight. That's the other thing I've noticed in history. It's like the people that are willing to – no, but listen, the people that are willing to die for their cause are the ones that usually are positioned better to win whatever the battle is. If you're willing to go down fighting as opposed to sidestepping and ignoring and don't want to be inconvenienced, you're really not in position to win these battles. And it feels like, to me, like you have a lot of people on the left and people of color are kind of willing to literally burn down the house to make their point and win the battle.
That's what's crazy. Can you imagine some white wealthy liberal watching his house on Lake of the Isles smolder and then saying to himself, "Well, we deserved it." I mean.
But isn't that part of the conflict too? Is like they would say it on social media but not believe it, and so there's an insincerity going on big time, and that's what social media.
Yeah, that's the whole. Yeah, how many of these people out there? Like I just saw something. There was someone who worked at one of the large law firms in town was posting about how they acknowledge their implicit bias and they're going to work to reduce, their privilege. And my first thought was, well, you could resign your post at blank and blank, and give it to some, hand your files over to the minority lawyers there and say, here you go, take my book of business.
Yeah. Well, isn't it just
that's one way you could do it.
But that's part of it. No, of course they won't do it because it's a PR
I think they're
play.
Playing lip service to it.
Yeah, but it's like everything's PR. It's like everything is fucking PR to present a face that looks like you're politically correct in order to offend the least number of people and in turn keep the most customers/clients. And it's just like the amount of bullshit. It's like you're walking around in bullshit all the time. It's like when I walk into a bathroom and there's a sign that says employees must wash their hands.
I always want to add, and you probably ought to as well. You know what I mean? Like, I think that'd be fantastic.
But it's a classic example of like passive aggressive PRing. Like it's like just tell your fucking employees that, but it's not really for that. It's for me to feel comfort that you have a strong hand washing policy.
Yeah.
At your.
Of course, there's a way I could test that when I'm checking out cantaloupes in the Hy-Vee, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but that's this is the world we live in, right? So all these corporations, they're gonna come out in support of Black Lives Matter, which on its face is not a big deal. It's like, okay, yeah, of course, generally speaking, we're for equality, but when you start to dig into, who you might be endorsing and who you might be offending, you start going, okay, this is a little more layered than that. But at the end of the day, it's just risk reward. The risk of them
calculate. They're going to say, they're going to say, who are we going to offend, and is it okay if we do this?
Do they care if they offend 15, Chuck?
15. So the radical right wing won't go to Target anymore. They don't care because they will lose out on the radical left wing. So it's all about.
But not only just lose out on the radical left, Chuck. You know what the radical left would do if they felt like they were being discriminated against? They would be the noisemakers, and they would create a campaign that shuts them down. That's the cancel culture. You're not going to go out and organize a cancel culture on fucking Chick-fil-A or any fast food restaurant because
I don't think I've ever once not bought something from a company because of the political stance they took. Like Patagonia was like something about the global climate change, and I was like, well, they still have cool jackets. I'm still gonna buy. I'll still get one.
Right, but don't you think you're also aware enough to know, that it's more complex than some commercial that says they give 5% of their profits to whatever I mean, that shit just doesn't work. I mean,
corporations are they're in it to make money. That's what they do.
yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just part of
So
being a
am I.
capitalist. Yeah. I
What
wish
I'm
they.
not okay with is it's one thing to pay lip service to it and marketing and all that. I think what you're going to find is you're going to find people who are working for these large corporations, and in their HR departments, they're going to have to go through this sort of flogging, you know, self-actualization crap in order to keep your job. And so
Yeah, that's what's going to
you're
happen.
sitting there as a middle manager. You've got 2 kids at home. You make $120,000 a year. You've got $500,000 in your 401k. You've got a nice 4-bedroom house in Maple Grove.
You've managed to not offend anybody on social media up to this point, so you still have a reputation that's intact.
Yeah. And so I think you'll have to hear that and sit there and just be and listen to that stuff. And if you speak out, you'll lose your job. And
it's unbelievable.
And you just got to deal with it. And then private again. And this is what's so crap about it, is that they'll privately nod along, and in their mind, they're thinking this is a bunch of crap.
Mm-hmm.
So from an effectiveness standpoint, like, it doesn't really do anything.
Well, unless there's that sort of like wear you down over time, almost brainwashing. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like they go so far over the line to get you to do stuff that there is some residual effect. Like you just sort of become rewired to not even address it in your mind for fear of saying or doing the wrong thing or fucking having a facial expression that looks wrong, that it's actually rewiring you. I mean, that's not that far-fetched.
What was the last time you read 1984 by George Orwell?
A long time ago.
You got to read it, because this is so on point.
Is it?
Like, yeah. I mean, it's crazy.
I'm not even sure I've read it all the way through. I think we were assigned it in college. Yeah. I don't think I've actually ever read it.
It's amazing. But I think people used to fear the government doing things to you. And that was a good, healthy fear, because the government has the power of the sword and can go after you. But no one really feared IBM doing anything to you, or United Health Group. But now I think you have to, and my God, I remember I worked for one of the big four, and we would get this stuff, and you just kind of nod along, but there was no forcing you to take any beliefs, but their official positions were certainly the politically correct positions of the day. And it's like, okay, if what happens if this gets to the point where I have to start adopting these as my belief systems,
Yeah. Well, it used to just be like OSHA type stuff. That was the idea. It was like, yeah, okay, I got to be safer on the workplace for fear of some sort of consequence that could cost them money. But now it's almost like there's a social OSHA, right? It's almost like now you've got to comply philosophically and ideologically with these like requirements.
And corporations have had cultures before, but they were always based on their products. Like IBM, you had to have a white shirt and I think a black necktie or something like that, right? I mean, there's a certain corporate culture that you can define, and that's fine. But pushing social agendas, I think, is scary. At small companies, it's not, it won't happen because people can up and leave. But I fear for the people who are sitting there again, working at a Medtronic or United or a 3M or something like that, a big major company where there is a lot of opportunity there financially, and it's a secure job, and people are always going to be buying duct tape. And so, but you got to play along with all of the,
aren't we just creating? We're just creating like humanoids, like androids. I mean, isn't that really what we're just creating? If we're trying to homogenize our values and homogenize our perspective and homogenize our opinions. I mean, isn't that ultimately what we're doing? We're just kind of robotizing.
Well, you could do a whole nother show on corporate culture. It's got its own lingo, and if you ever worked for a large company, and you have, and I have, it's
not too many. I haven't.
But it's I go here to work, to earn a paycheck, and to go home.
Mm-hmm.
Is it my passion? No, international tax is not my passion. If it is someone's passion, you've got a problem.
It's like the
You
line
know?
from that. What was that movie where that young girl gets knocked up? God, what the fuck was it called? And and the dad isn't heating and cooling. And he was like, no, heating and cooling was not my passion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
And
mean,
it's a
but
job.
for the purpose of efficiency, I can understand having a corporate culture and having a language. I mean, it's for efficiency.
Sure.
I mean,
Right.
it makes a lot of sense. That's not what this is anymore. This is like
No, your life is the company.
we're lobotomizing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's almost like either people don't understand it, Chuck, or either they don't understand the consequences of it. Like they're not seeing it 3 and 4 steps down the path, which, by the way, doesn't surprise me for a lot of left-leaning people, because I feel like pretty much their first reaction is the overarching one they stick with most of the time. It seems to be like a fundamental like principle of left ideology. It's like my first reaction's my whole reaction. So it wouldn't surprise me that they haven't looked 3 or 4 beats down the tiger trail to figure out how this plays out. But if you do that, it doesn't look good for humanity. It doesn't really look good for humanity. It doesn't. I mean, that sounds dramatic, but what are we talking about here? You're just going to homogenize, and if you don't buy into this, you're going to be destroyed. You're going to be destroyed financially. Your reputation.
Do you think that the Nazis sold that idea to the people based on what the eventual outcome of Nazism was? Do you think that the Bolsheviks got all those people on board in the October Revolution, knowing that, by the way, there'll be soup lines and walls to keep you in the gulags?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure they knew that was the end. It was just a matter of like sort of micromanaging in the moment.
I think this stuff creeps in, and that's why, people need to be aware of the republic that they live in, the history.
Yeah, but you know what they need? You know what they need? They need to have critical conversation, and that's what's so dangerous about this latest movement is that it's been chilled out of the dialogue.
Well, there's too many facts to undermine their positions.
The definition, yes, but the definition of racism now has been stretched so broadly that even the act of asking a follow-up question is now regarded as racism. So what's the effect? You either end up asking those questions and becoming a racist, or you shut the fuck up.
Right.
And more often than not, people are shutting the fuck up. I have this podcast, right, which nobody fucking listens to. I get that. You know what I mean? I'm 4 episodes in. I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it for my kids to get insight in who I am. But I have a list of, 25, 30 people that I know really well who I would love to have conversations with. And what percentage do you think are willing to sit down and talk? Very small.
Well, I'm not married, nor do I have kids, so I don't really give a crap. So I'm happy to divulge. But yeah,
Chuck, don't downplay that courage that you're showing just by doing this, because there's not a lot of upside for you. You're not here to promote anything. You know what you like? You like good conversation. That's what you're here for.
I find these conversations fascinating when people are like, "Oh, you like to talk politics." I don't necessarily like to. If people took a keen eye to the things that I posted on Facebook, I usually posted them in the form of a question. It was thought provoking. They weren't declaratory statements about this sucks, or it was what do you guys think about this? Is this really where we want to go? And I'm fascinated by those questions of how to best order a society. What's the integration between political philosophy, economic philosophy, theology?
John Hughes.
John Hughes movies, U2 B-sides, they're all there.
There's a common thread there, though.
Yeah,
deep layered subtext. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot there.
That's basically my world is just thinking of those things. But those are fun conversations to have, and those are the questions that really you really probe people like.
But you have to enjoy. The substance has to be in the conversation, not the result or looking correct. So much of what goes on Facebook is like wanting to be right, not really interested in getting it right. And I stole that phrase from, I think maybe Colin Cowherd. I heard that first. It's like this idea that you're obsessed with being right instead of getting it right. There's a difference there, right?
Wouldn't you love to have? I would love to have a pleasant civil conversation with somebody about white privilege, systemic racism, and really inquire as to what it means without being accused of a racist for challenging certain points and asking certain questions.
And by the way, like stating right from the beginning, I'm open to be educated on this. I'm open to having my mind changed. That's the thing that's so important. It's like this idea that you can't evolve. And that's another thing that technology, especially the stuff that lives forever on Twitter and Facebook, it's like if you post something, especially these poor kids who do it when they're 17, 18, and then they've got to go relive it at 28, it's like you're not allowed to evolve. And I think that's one of the, first of all, it's fundamental to being human, this idea that we're evolving all the time, not just biologically, but spiritually and philosophically. And you take one trip overseas, you come back, you're a different person. You could be gone 10 days. You are a completely different person on a lot of levels. And I'm open to being persuaded, Chuck. Like, but I can't get there if I can't have a conversation is not a fucking forest fire of emotion and accusations. And then I'm basically, I got a sock shoved in
that should tell you something. That should tell you that they're not really interested in quote, changing the hearts and minds. It's a scorched earth war. We're going to tell you what you should believe and what you should think, and you're going to deal with it. And if you don't, we're going to play the racist card on you, and you're going to have to deal with that if you run for office, if you try to launch a podcast, if you try to succeed at a large law firm, if you try to do anything that relies upon major institutions. My church put a statement
and it'll
out.
Work.
Huh?
And it'll work. It's not like
it'll work.
It's not like
my church put out a statement about this stuff, and I'm like, boy, that's not really consistent with my understanding of sin. This idea of we acknowledge a collective sin, and I'm like, no. I don't ever remember Christ ever saying anything about society sinning. Individuals sin. Individuals fall short.
What was was their goal just to look sympathetic, or they?
Yes, because they are, and I don't want to disparage them, but they are a larger, established, affluent, mainline Protestant church. And I saw this, and I'm like, you're playing lip service to it. They don't really believe it, or if they do, they believe it in a fashionable way. It's a nice thing to talk about at a cocktail party in Kenwood, but they don't really.
Where is Kenwood? That. Where is Kenwood? Is that a fictional place with?
No, it's in South Minneapolis. It's just north of Lake of the Isles. There, all those mansions.
Well, that shows you what I know. It sounds beautiful.
And the church it's beautiful. I volunteered there.
Can I get a Cabernet while I'm there to talk?
No, and they do great work. I just was kind of bothered by this statement. I'm not boycotting them. I'm gonna continue to go. It's great, but it's that same old. We feel compelled to take a position. Like, is there something in between acknowledging your privilege and buying an AR-15 and going into a bunker?
It doesn't seem like there is. It doesn't seem like there is. That's the Fox/CNN environment.
It was my position on when people said like on the whole, and I don't want to talk gay rights because it's a dull conversation, and I got a lot of gay friends and they're cool as hell. But believe it or not,
it is Pride. It's Pride Month. You'd never know it based on what's going on in the news.
Right, and they've been usurped for their month now, and I'm sure they're angry about it. But where was I going to go with this? Shoot.
You want to talk about your gay friends?
No, I had a good thought. It was
the church.
Oh, forget it. I lost it. It was probably the best point of the night, but it's gone.
But no, you have to pick a side, an extreme side.
Oh, right. So you are either homophobic, and I'm creating a word here, or you are a homophile, like an Anglophile or an audiophile. Mm-hmm. You're an ally, or you're against. It's like, can I just kind of be indifferent and just judge on who you are? Why do I need to take a side in this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that shades of gray are interesting to people. That's what I don't really know anymore. I don't know what the truth is. I don't know if what I'm reading is a sincere indication of the way people think. I don't know if the news I'm reading is the whole picture, part of the picture, a total whiff on the picture. It's fucking insane. But it is all thrown at me in black and white terms, Chuck. It's like I can only imagine what would what kind of adult I would end up being if I was in my impressionable formative years when this was the landscape. Because we have the luxury of having straddled sort of the pre-internet world about right down the middle at this point, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, the internet existed, but not in a way that we used on a regular basis, and certainly not anywhere near the way it's used now, until we were probably about 20, 21, 22, right? Because that would have put us in the late 90s. If you think Amazon.
I remember Asp was emailing me freshman year of college, and I had no idea what the hell email was.
Right. I can
Christmas
remember when
time, he was complaining why I wasn't responding, and I'm like, I don't know what email is, dude. What are you talking? I'm in a fraternity. I don't have no idea what email is.
Yeah. Well, we all got email addresses in the fall of '95 when we went off to college, and it was cool. It was cool. I mean, I was in Indianapolis at Butler University, crying my eyes out at night because I felt like I was so far from home.
I was homesick too in Iowa. I'm like, why am I not at St. John's with Finn and Sobiak?
Yeah, why am I not with every one of my friends? Yeah. And I was legitimately depressed. I mean, I basically sabotaged my baseball experience there because I was so sad. But email was like this connective tissue. Because I knew everybody had one. It was a .edu email address. But that's so we're 18 at that point. We didn't really start using the internet until, for anything other than just kind of like pictures of Jennifer Love Hewitt, for a couple of years, right? Because Amazon.
You did last summer.
And then it was like Napster and all that stuff. And it was like all of a sudden what the internet could be was unleashed. But we've had the luxury of really spending our first 20 years in one world and our last 20 in another. And look what impact it's had on us. Can you imagine that this is the world you're growing up in? And everything is this inflamed and this black and white, and everything you do, it's like you're not allowed to make a mistake. You're not allowed to make a mistake. And so what I think I would buy into the prevailing safe perspective. I think I probably what the fuck? At 16, 18, I got to make a decision to be Alex P. Keaton and fight the left. I mean, fuck that, dude. And plus, we're all pretty liberal. I mean, I think you were an exception. I think, you understood politics and some of this stuff at a young age, but almost everybody I knew either had no clue where they stood on the political spectrum or, were left. Just because when you're a kid, it's like, what do you mean? Yeah,
I was trying to think about that. Like why was I so involved in it? I don't have a good answer, but it was just one of those things that I was always kind of interested in history and all that.
I feel like, not to answer for you, but I feel like, you grew up with a dad who was, other than maybe one or two other people I knew, was significantly older. And I think it's a completely different.
He was 42 when I was born. Yeah.
Okay, so he's 42 years old when you were born. At a time, by the way, when a lot of people, I don't think, actually had kids younger, right? I mean, the majority of people that I knew, their parents, that was a different time. You weren't getting established and getting your own place and being independent. It was like you got out of high school, you might have fucked around in college for a little bit, you pretty much married and settled down. And your dad obviously had your brother when he was, I guess, 34-ish or something. But having you at 42 meant he was wise. He was older. I'm sure he was much more financially stable than, say, my parents. My mom had me at 20. It was chaos.
I thought about that. When you talk about privilege, the privilege that I have that I will acknowledge, and I'd like to use advantage or blessing or whatever you want to call it, was I was born to two very loving parents who were well established by the time I was born. I was born. John lived in a small house in North Minneapolis with my parents, but my parents built that house in Robbinsdale, which was a very nice house. It is, it's Gold Coast, Robbinsdale. So, but that's the environment I was born into, with a dad who was a broker at Merrill Lynch and my mom was a flight attendant, and they had a decent income. We weren't wealthy. I mean, you were over there, but we weren't poor either, and
it felt like it was just very like stable. Yeah.
And the naivete that I had growing up, when I went to, my friends were you, and you had a nice house and your parents were together, and Kevin Black had a decent, a nice house and his parents were together, and Jim Fraser and Luke, everyone had a kind of the same normalcy. You
Mm-hmm.
know, everything seemed pleasant. There weren't any real broken homes. And I grew up thinking, well, everybody must be like this. Everyone must go home to a
Right.
father who's there and is genuinely concerned about your homework and will play catch with you in the backyard. And Christmas was never bad.
Right.
You know,
Well,
and that's if there's any sort of like, listening and learning that I need to do or I needed to do, it was back then when I was just like, I just assumed that everyone had that upbringing, and I'm not going to apologize for it, but that's a huge advantage if you have that.
huge. And that's what I
You
think
have
that's what's being talked about, is that you're a blue-eyed, blonde-haired, you know, athletic kid, who came from a great family and had,
violin virtuoso at age 9. No,
yes, and all of the like cognitive skills anybody would ever hope for, teaching himself instruments
yeah.
and great at
It
sports.
peaked in 1987, then just went downhill from there. But
You were the
at
first.
least we had the opportunity.
You were the first alpha dog that I knew, really, in the neighborhood. You were.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Does that bring back bad memories? Because you were only an alpha dog until you were in 5th grade.
Yeah. I don't know what the hell happened, man, but
You're the best athlete I knew.
mean, I think I made Vince Vaughn look like a moron, like a dork when I was in 5th grade.
Mm-hmm. You did, but you still have all that intellectual. I mean, I don't want to put you in a weird position, but I would say you're probably a genius in terms of your ability to retain information. No, I don't really like that term. I've actually always thought that term's kind of a cop-out, because someone's only a genius if they're good at something you wish you were good at, right? I mean, if I call Roger Clemens a genius, it's because I just wish I was a pitcher. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's all relative to your interests, but your ability to recall details from books you've read, movies you've seen, experiences you had as a kid. I mean, there's something going on with your brain that's.
It's a lot of downtime. I'm not married. I don't have children, so I do. Every time I come home from work, I have a lot of time on my hands. So
Yeah, but to retain all that.
a lot of time for self-reflection, a lot of time for reading. I read a lot.
Have you ever had an IQ test of any kind?
Yeah, so I got into kindergarten early. Okay.
Okay.
My mom saved the letter. And funny story, my mom said, I want to see if Charlie can get into kindergarten a year early. And I said, I'm 4 or whatever. And you have to take a test. And I'm presuming that was an IQ test. And they said, well, most people don't pass. And certainly those who do pass are overwhelmingly girls.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I passed.
Okay. Is there a score on it of any kind?
The score, I don't know what the score was in 1982. Currently, today, the score is you got to have an IQ of 130.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what's genius level? I don't know enough about IQs.
Like, I don't know, but 130 puts you in the top like 2%.
Okay, yeah, that's
the equivalent of like a 30 on your ACT.
It's like Mensa shit or something.
Yeah, I think you're there too. I didn't know what shrub was. I asked my mom in the car, Mom, what's a shrub? And she flipped out.
Wow.
Like, she's like, you don't know what a shrub is? I'm like, I'm looking up at her. I'm 4 or 5, but I don't know. Maybe the bar in 1982 was like an IQ of 120.
Yeah, maybe.
So I'm thinking, honestly, I'm probably around I think I'm in the mid 120s, 125, high 120s.
Yeah. I mean, and who knows the
It doesn't matter. Does it really matter?
No, it doesn't, unless you just want to bring it out at a party to be a prick. But your ability to retain information, and it's almost encyclopedic. Do you think, has that been an advantage to you, or is there a disadvantage to being sort of that aware and knowledgeable in so many different subjects?
I get a little scrambled.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of things like maybe in this interview, I'm kind of jumping from one issue to the next, almost like a dyslexia almost. There's too many thoughts going on.
Right.
One thing I'd like to work on is like, that when Peterson calls conscientiousness, right? The ability to focus on one thing and do it well. And that hasn't been my strongest suit.
Yeah. And has that affected your, career path?
I don't think so. because, you couldn't be, I do my job well. You couldn't do it well. When I mean, I'm not conscientious. I mean, I really envy those people who really dig in and like the Michael Jordan work ethic, like to really sit there or the Thomas Edison work ethic. Whether it's, or
an obsessiveness is what it is.
Yeah. Like the whole, 10,000 hours thing, right? Like, okay, what if, it's almost like an ADD with things. Oh, I'd like to read. And then every time I'm reading, I'm looking at my guitar thinking, I could be practicing my scales. And then I'm playing the guitar and I'm thinking I could be reading. Or, there's always that ADD that comes with, things you want to do. And I don't know if that's just
well, don't you think that's conditioning in this culture? I read the Einstein biography, and one of the things that jumped out at me, a lot of stuff jumped out at me about how brilliant the guy was, but one of the things was just the amount of uninterrupted time he had in his life to literally ponder. And I'm talking like days.
Yeah.
Where he would get on a thought, and that thought could fully bake. Like he could walk down the path of that thought and let it sort of grow. Like it, you take a kernel of an idea, it literally is like planted, and then you water it with like little mini hypotheses, and it grows, and it grows organically, just like a plant would, and uninterrupted. And so what he could do, obviously he had some like next level ability to stay focused, but he also existed in a time when it's like he wasn't getting bing 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 bing
right
text messages.
I would say the same thing with they talk about the founding fathers. These men were brilliant. They were brilliant, but they also had a lot of time. Like Thomas Jefferson had a lot of time to read, and that's the only thing you could do was read philosophy. That's it.
I don't think
that's why they're so. They are like you'd be pretty good at the guitar if that all you could do. The only thing in your room was a guitar, and the best like teaching books out there. Mm-hmm. After a year, you'd probably I can play Van Halen's Eruption. Check it out. And before you were playing a few chords, but
Three Blind Mice.
If imagine you're living, it's the 1760s. You're on a plantation. Unfortunately, black people are doing your labor for you for free. So you capitalize on that. And you sit around and read philosophy all day long because that's all there is to do. You're going to get pretty good at it.
I don't think people nowadays can even comprehend what that concept is like, to have uninterrupted thought or access to one hobby for days on end.
And there's no distractions.
No distractions.
Maybe Jefferson was like, boy, I'd rather be playing the harpsichord than reading this Montesquieu. But
Well, and I'm sure there was daydreaming about women, right?
Oh, of course. And maybe we're putting these guys on a pedestal that we shouldn't. But
when you say you're distracted, it's like, dude, think about the challenges. I could see Einstein having zero interest in figuring out physics if he's fucking got a sweet Facebook post in his head and he just can't figure out exactly how to word it, and finally it clicks and he posts it, and then he wants to see the responses to it, and he gets that response from that one person he's not really friends with, but he's still Facebook friends with them, and it didn't get the post, and so he's got to come in. He's got to go back and forth. You can just pretty much forget the theory of relativity if Einstein's defending a Facebook post that this turd misunderstood.
I don't think Zeppelin 4, the album, would have been written in a social media world. I don't think Jimmy Page or any of those guys would have sat down and said, I don't have time to write. I've got a rant here on Twitter.
Well, and I've thought about this. Like, if I have a superpower, it's probably creativity. I'm shit at business. I'm not that great at relationships. It's probably creativity. And the one thing social media has done is it's allowed me to like kind of pop the bubble during the day, so nothing builds up, right? Like I don't have this like creative energy that builds up inside me with no outlet. I've got 1,000 outlets. So instead of finding a way to monetize it or funnel it all into a career, it's like I can barf up a one-liner on Facebook, and then I can go post a creative picture on Instagram, and then I can, read a bunch of shit on Twitter, and then maybe fire off one more post, and then I go to bed at night feeling like I've got setting the world on fire with creativity. And it's like,
I think it's
fucked.
It's also, it's like a psychological release too. Like it's therapeutic. Like you said, you post something on there and you're like, certain people like it or think it's funny, and you're like, oh, that's, that like made my night.
That's nice. That
yeah.
feels pretty good. That feels pretty good.
Yeah, that was a funny one. I knew it was a funny one-liner. I knew it.
Yeah.
And as I was writing it, I knew someone was going to find it funny, and that son of a bitch did. And God, who needs to practice the guitar and try to write songs when you can make random people from high school laugh fakely on a social media website?
It's really fucking gross and pathetic and a waste.
What does your dad think about that? Like, because I've wanted to, like, it's almost like Facebook or social media is like your own private psychiatrist. Like you can just vent like you're on the couch.
Yes, that's true.
You just vent. And then I realize you do too much of it, and I go from like 478 friends down to 111. And I'm like, all right, I got clients looking at this stuff.
No,
you know what
I know. It's
like, you're like, oh God, I just want to shoot myself. And I'm like, wait a minute, my best client is reading this.
Yeah, and by the way, there's just moments where I'm emotional, right? I'm more, maybe not relative to the most emotional people out there, but relative to the way I operate, I'm emotional that night. So what I'm coming with is zingers that are designed to make you cry, like designed to make you cry or hate yourself. And it's like when I'm in that headspace, I'm like, this is great. I'm fueled by my own insanity. And then it's like, the dust settles. And I go back and look at some of it, and it's like, okay, I was a psychopath from 8 to 8:45.
I will be arguing with someone I've never met in my entire life.
That's fucked.
And I'm typing it, and I'm like, you're talking like, I'm like, I'm gonna outgun you on this one. You're done. I'm gonna show you how smart I am.
Yeah, I know.
And then you lay the hook, and they bite, and they come back in, and then you realize, then like 5 of their ignorant friends chime in. Yeah. Now you're getting bombarded, and now it's like you want to leave, but then you're lighting up. So you come back and you have a sandwich. You come back an hour later, and you're like, phone died. Here's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's gross.
And then you realize you're 42 years old. When your father was this age, he had a wife.
Dad. The new dad.
Yeah, a newborn, your older brother, a mortgage, and a good job, and a 34-inch waist. So like just, know.
Yeah.
Just calm.
It was
just calm down.
Yeah, just calm down. You have that sidebar with yourself.
Yeah.
But if anybody wrote that to you, if anybody wrote that exact thing to you, you would detonate them. You would not let anybody say it to you, even though you're telling yourself that an hour after the posts.
No.
It's a fucked up world, and they've done tests like the endorphin rush you get when you get a like. It's like a palpable like drug chemical reaction. And
what if you get a heart? What's that do? If you get now they got a new one out there called Care. What the hell is that? They should have like a mildly amusing button where you're just kind of like.
I think there's an emoji that's mildly amused, but I don't know if it's on Facebook. Yeah, dude, look, I mean, I don't know. Is there any value in having all this knowledge and all this deep perspective and critically thinking about everything when people are communicating with emojis?
No. And one thing Facebook has done, or social media has done, is we talk about this at work because I work at a law firm that has wonderful people, very progressive people, very conservative people. We're all pretty much in the same age group. And one of the guys that I work with who have gotten along well is actually a partner. We agreed, like, if we had met on Facebook, social media, we'd be at each other's throats.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't talk to him.
Right.
And now we're going to go find rehearsal space and try to get a band together.
Yeah, because there's context to every conversation, right?
Because when you're a human being, social media, the internet, takes away the filter of social custom. And
What do you mean
tend,
social custom? What do you mean by that?
like the way you would behave at a dinner party is different than the way you'd behave at a poker game with your buddies.
Right.
Okay. And people say, well, you're not being authentic. Well, no, you are being authentic. I don't have to tell you the truth, like Jim Carrey and Liar Liar. There's some things I can hold back, and I can, like it's not going to hurt anyone if I say, yeah, you look great, when I'm thinking in my head, no, you don't,
Right.
So.
Or just say nothing, or just say nothing if you don't think they look great.
Right. But if you work with people, then you can't rant about what's going on in the transgender world.
Yeah.
Then you pull those back, and you're like, maybe that's not a serious issue.
Yeah.
And they can't rant about AR-15s, and they're like, you know what? Who really cares? And then you interact with people in these institutional settings, work, school, church, whatever, and you'll find out that we have our differences, but
also there's subtext to everything. So and that's where tone comes into play. That's where precedent comes into play. What have you said in the past, or what kind of relationship has already been fortified? All those things are happening simultaneously when you're having human to human real life interaction.
You can pick up like where they're like, yeah, and then you're like, okay, I know that's a clue not to go there.
Right.
You can read facial expressions, but in Facebook, it's just the curtain's pulled. It's just, here's my innermost thoughts. It's
not only that, but it's innermost thoughts that are designed to pack the most punch in the shortest amount of space. So it's like it really is like gut punches. It's like you're running up to somebody at a restaurant and punching them from behind. That's what it's more similar to that than having a conversation at a restaurant.
Yeah.
If you were going to compare the overlap, there's more in common with running up to somebody from behind and just whacking them than sitting and talking to them. There really is, because it's like it's designed to create the biggest ripple in the pond.
Yeah, it's funny that if the movie Social Network has any truth to it, this whole thing was designed so you could stalk chicks.
Yeah.
That's it goes from that, which may or may not be a good idea, to now we have this monster. But
and there's
everyone who listens to this is probably going to go laugh at me as being the biggest hypocrite in the world, and I freely admit I abused it. I was the first one to
Chuck,
all that stuff.
There's real utility in it, and that's why it works. I mean, that's why so many people have used it, and that's why it's literally changing the world. And I don't mean to sound like fucking, like Whitney Houston or something, but like it's changed the world. Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah.
I mean,
people are allowed to communicate and the looters, like if you're take like the like the KKK, right? In the absence of the internet and social media and all that stuff, if you're one of these guys who has a bad experience with a Jewish person or a black person, if it's 1980 and you're in Osseo, Minnesota, or you're in Egan and this happened, and that experience happens to you, for like a day, you're really pissed off at the world.
Right. And
for a day, you're a racist, maybe a couple days. But then you have no outlet to fuel that fire.
Right.
And it dies out.
And also, it dies out because the next 100 interactions have nothing to do with that.
And they're normal. And you're like, and you start to reflect, wow, that was really scary that I could think like that. Mm-hmm. Nowadays that happens, and you're locked in your basement online, talking with other people with similar stories, and you're just feeding that monster. And that's when you emerge with an AR-15, you start gunning people down. That's my theory. But
yeah. Do you think the government should be getting involved with in terms of regulating social media's ability to regulate speech, or how big they can get, and how Google's got its fingers in the pot of everything. Amazon's got its hands in everything now. I mean, if you start talking about controlling monopolies and things like that, I mean, should they continue to be able to just sort of exist at the size that they exist right now with the reach they have? You're a small government guy, so
Yeah, I don't like the government stepping in and saying you can't regulating speech, and to me, speech is just speech. I don't consider
Right.
photograph images speech. I disagree with the whole, pornography is free speech. I don't think our democracy would crumble if hardcore porn suddenly left the universe. But that said, I think it's a bigger problem when you start to figure out what's included, what's not. With respect to the monopoly thing, there are companies that are big that are involved in a lot of different things. Yamaha makes pianos and they make motorcycles. That's a weird combo, but they do. Amazon sells you books and then also provides movies and original content. It's a weird combo.
And Whole Foods and Washington Post and
yeah. As long as there's the ability to have a competing source, I think I'm fine with it.
Okay.
And conservatives complain about this all the time. Are these large media companies they're censoring? YouTube censors Dennis Prager and Twitter is censoring Donald Trump and all this stuff. Well, go start up a competing company that doesn't filter out political stuff and see if people sign on to it.
Yeah, they exist. I'm trying to think.
Twitter's
got a. Go ahead.
It's like Hollywood. When they say Hollywood's too left wing, it's like they don't produce conservative movies. It's like, what's stopping you from creating a production company? Money.
That, and I just don't think. I don't think people who possess the conservative perspective share a lot of traits with people that want to make films. There's something about that, and that's just why. It's just simple as that. I don't think it's any more complex than that. I think there'd be an audience for them, but I just think a lot of times conservatives are much more pragmatic. They're much more sort of dollar and cents driven. That's why they end up being producers a lot of times, or the financiers, or a lot of times maybe the agents or something like that. But the actual creators, there's something about seeing the world in a way where you can reinterpret it, and then you on top of it you have the desire to let everybody know what your perspective is. That's I'm
getting to the point of barriers to entry, right? And you can't complain, I would say, in the world of the internet and media, about barriers to entry. What you're doing right now could blow up and you could be the next. We got to get our message on the slab because Eric Stormont reaches everyone in the universe. So yeah, are these companies getting? I don't know the details behind the whole. I think it has something to do with we'll pull their regulation on their ability to be sued for slander.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that there's speech that's being regulated now. It's like to determine whether something is or was hate speech seems very politically motivated.
Right.
It really does.
And the argument is, are you a platform? If you're truly a digital platform to let people say whatever the hell they want, then we're not going to hold you liable for slander and libel suits and make you responsible for your content. Right. The way the New York Times is responsible for its content.
Right.
But
if you are, and then you're in turn silencing certain people that have, a perspective that maybe you don't agree with, or the person in charge of moderating doesn't.
No longer a platform.
It's like, and you're as powerful as you are in terms of creating a public sentiment.
Now you're almost a public utility, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like you have more power than the government itself in so many ways. It's like incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
You said earlier about how, they feared the government in 1984 and some of those other, books and speeches and papers. And it's like, they didn't anticipate what technology was going to do in terms of supplanting the government as more pervasive, more powerful.
Right.
And also they didn't anticipate people sort of willingly handing over these liberties, because the idea that you would voluntarily give up all your data or allow people to spy on you just because it made your Google Maps more efficient was a concept that even the smartest people couldn't have predicted. And that's,
Right.
in a way, that's the brilliance of it all. It's like they got us begging for it.
Yeah.
They got us begging for it. Even the staunchest, most fucking stuffy. It's like, well, oh, you mean if I opt into this, like it can tell me what restaurants are in the area too? Well, yeah, okay, I'm good. I agree. I agree. Click. It's incredible.
I wonder what they know about me. Like at some point they'll be like, yeah, he's running for city council, but the second he runs for like something bigger, then all the weird shit's gonna come out.
Yeah, at city council level, you're no threat to anything.
Right.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Where are you at with that? So you're going to make your first official foray into public office.
Well, I am. Are
we still going with Chaz? Have we rethought the Chaz signs?
I want to talk to you about that because I think that's hilarious. So yeah, I thought of a great lawn sign that because my last name is just too damn long. So it's a nonpartisan position, and it truly is nonpartisan, and I'm approaching it that way. City level politics is something that really shouldn't be about left and right. It should be about what are we, we're trying to take the trash out. We're trying to get, the water treatment plant up and running or improved. My biggest issue is trying to find a pedestrian and bike friendly overpass over 81. When I was a little boy where we lived, I couldn't ride my bike to the Dairy Queen. I got in trouble for doing that.
Didn't Ryan Murphy get hit by a bus trying to do that?
Some kid got hit pretty hard, and there's high speed chases. And so
we're talking about Birdtown, by the way.
Yeah, this is Robbinsdale, Minnesota. And so that's one of the things that I really care about because, I grew up in Robbinsdale. I was basically born there. I was born in Minneapolis, but 2 days later I was brought home to the only house I ever knew in Robbinsdale. And it's an open seat, and so I care about my community. I like the idea, the idea of working in government, and that idea of shaping our society and our order and how that works appeals to me. I think it'd be a fun, interesting experience. And but that's where the ideology, it stops right there, because if tax dollars need to be raised to pay for this thing that I think will benefit the city, then that's what you got to do. So. I'm not going in with any rigid ideology about what needs to be done. It's more, I think I'm smart enough for the job. I think I care deeply enough about the community, and I have a history to back that up. And if not me, then why not me? You know what I mean?
I can't imagine anybody having more hours spent in Birdtown over the last 40 years. I guess there's some old timers that have been there the whole time, but you qualify in terms of just being a Birdtown resident and super fan. What generally do people that run for this office? What is the background generally of these people? Are they just regular citizens?
Yeah,
just teachers.
There's I think the mayor Regan Murphy. I think he's in sales. I think one of the guys the guy who's got the seat right now. He's a lawyer. He's running for mayor. There's a couple other people. You literally pay $5 to run.
Right.
And if there's more than so you had to file by May 19th until June 2nd was the filing period. And you filed $5 to file. You had to say, I'm a Robbinsdale resident, whatever. You didn't have to give any position statements or anything like that. And then if there's more than 2 people on the ballot, then you have a primary.
This is exciting.
And that was kind of disconcerting because it was like, okay, it's COVID. Now I have an opponent, and he's, he works for the state senator in this area, and so he's going to have his campaign all ready to go. And I've run campaigns before too, but with COVID hitting, I was not ready to start campaigning, door to door with a mask on and say hi. I'd like to, can I shake your hand? No, thanks. But yeah. What do you? Yeah, it's just closing the door. But that's how you win a local election: is you have to go door to door, and you got to hand out your materials and tell people why you're running and what you're going to do. And they like you, they like you. If they don't, they don't.
What does the primary consist of? I mean, what does that mean? Is it?
Well, the good news is I don't have one because the third person dropped out.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so it's you against this incumbent? No, against this other guy.
This other guy, and I will probably. I'm hoping we can have the Whiz Bang Day parade and do all that stuff and get shirts. But anyway, so the point is, okay, so I was gonna have this campaign. And my last name being too long, I thought, well, what about just Chaz with the next?
And we talked about this. We actually talked about it.
like a Wellstone sign. Remember the old Wellstone? Just said Wellstone with an exclamation point.
Yep.
Because elect Charles Austinson is just like
boring.
It's too. Yeah, that's boring. It's like
Mayor. It's like Back to the Future. Mayor Gold. What was it? Mayor
Goldie Wilson.
Yeah. We don't with one of those like horns on top of the car. Elect Charles Austinson.
Austinson. Yeah,
it's boring. But Chaz has like
Chaz. But then the anarchists in Seattle decided to.
I think it's even more reason to double down on Chaz because
I'm gonna do it. Because
all you're looking for is to generate like some sort of like double take. That's all you're trying to do here.
Right. That's what the lawn signs do. What is that? What's Chaz?
Is he for an autonomous zone here?
Right. And then they go look at the sign, and then they read, and then there's Charles Austinson for City Council Ward 1, and then a website.
Yeah. So there's a place they can get a little bio on you, some background and what have you.
Some video, place, and then they'll see this podcast and they'll be like, that guy's crazy. But
I just want a Chaz t-shirt with an exclamation point.
Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Navy blue with white. That's kind of what we're going for. But so that's going to happen.
Why wouldn't you go navy? Why wouldn't you go blue and yellow, Birdtown colors?
Because it's more expensive.
Let's talk to Minnie.
Dude, you want to cut me a fat check? Fine. But,
what do we get a budget t-shirt? What's your budget?
I think I can run a campaign for about $2,500.
Can I put
solid one?
Can I put slab on the back of it, on the collar?
I gotta look at the campaign laws. I'm not sure I can have sponsors.
Oh yeah, you probably can. I would say I'll help pay for it if I can get some PR out of this thing. I'd love to.
You and your brood can go in the truck and we can,
Fuck yes, dude. You know how fun that would be? Just have fun with it.
I want to get Babis to help out too. I think he would.
Babis would be in for sure.
Yeah.
We could make this huge.
Yeah. No, it'd be fun. And
then what does your day-to-day consist of? I mean, what kind of responsibilities? You got to sit in some alderman meetings or something, or what do you have to do?
Yeah, they have meetings every week and public hearings.
Okay.
I think they meet every week. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Do
you have like a getaway camp at Isabella with all the other like a
retreat
city officials?
I wonder if I get my own armed guards. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would.
I can go to Broadway Pizza and order a sausage, and no one will mess with me. Be like,
what does your dad say about it?
Yeah, he's just like, whatever, go for it. He's always been that way. Honest to God, as sort of conservative as the guy's been, he's always said, whatever it is you want to do, go do it, but do it well. You know what I mean? So my mom isn't too thrilled. She doesn't like the limelight and anything. So
really, she actually has concerns about that, huh?
Yeah, she's like, why do you want to do that? And I'm like, well.
I like when she chimes in on your Facebook posts. What about John? What does John think?
He likes it. He's cool with it. He's he'd be a good. He's a teacher in the school district here, so.
Yeah. And one of the funniest humans I ever met in my life.
Yeah,
he's got a couple of funny shit to help, market what you're doing, or.
Yeah, I was gonna have him in a photograph too, and then that way, if any, he'd be a good campaign aide.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So what's the timeline on all this? How it shakes out?
So I'm thinking, actually, I'm going to get everything started, the campaign, website, and all that up and running in the next couple weeks. I'm going to get an account this week, and I'll start taking donations, soliciting donations. And then once I get the money, what I'll do is I'm working with a company that's familiar with this sort of thing. And so you basically get your standard lawn signs, and you get about 100 of them. And then you print off, 4x9, glossy too. There's a photograph and then a couple bullet points. Here's who I am and all that stuff. There's no real debates. It's not like, I was thinking about like, you could do it like really get really kind of funny with it and really have a good time with it and just say, I will be at the whatever coffee shop in downtown Robbinsdale with a, sort of like that. What's that dude like? Make me change my mind or whatever. What's that guy's?
Yeah, that meme that's around with the guy with the cardboard sign, like.
Yeah, with the mic,
Yep.
like what's on your mind, Birdtown?
Yeah.
I'm running and
Yeah.
just
Let's do it. I mean, you could with I mean, with social media, you can market anything. You don't need you don't need a
that's
marketing
nothing.
team.
You'll have the Facebook page, you'll have Twitter, and you'll have all that stuff. And it's very hard in a post-COVID, post-George Floyd world to make things fun anymore.
Yeah.
And to make it about the history of Robbinsdale. I mean, I see some of these Facebook posts and these community groups, and it's all about what we can do to change.
It's very serious.
And racial equity and all that. And I'm like, I care about a pedestrian and bike friendly passageway over 81.
Yeah.
That's my issue.
Yeah, it's a very serious time.
I'm not trying to transform the world.
Right.
I care about that.
If you can say that. Can you say that, or do you think everybody's just thirsty for intensity? I mean, I guess you'll find out.
And that's where you find out. That's where I'm going with. Do you run this kind of unconventionally? Do you, because you're not going to.
Like I told you on the phone, have fun with it, man. Because you're a bit of an overthinker. I mean, I'm the same way. It's like you could overthink the shit out of this and really paralyze yourself and come across as somebody who actually is taking it more seriously than you even are. So just have fun with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the best thing to do. It's like, I don't know. Yeah. If all of a sudden you think that, we're talking about police reform and
I'm talking about police reform in a town of 14,000 people.
Yeah.
It has maybe 20 officers. I mean, like, I don't know what reform you want. Do you want reform for reform's sake, or is there a real problem that you're trying to address?
I think some people it's part of what's happening. It's just, let's talk about it because it's getting attention. I would like to see the cops hand out football cards again. I mean,
I remember. Yeah, that was fun.
You get in a position. I mean, you talk about endearing yourself to the kids in the community. I used to run those fuckers down. We'd sit in the middle of Sanborn, so we were.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like.
For some reason, I always got Kirk Loudermilk dogs.
Yeah, I got a bunch of Kirk Loudermilks. It's like they had a surplus of Loudermilks, because I can remember getting like a shitload of Loudermilks. I think they might have given them away for 2 weeks because they couldn't get rid of all of them. Those cards are incredible. I still have a couple of them. Is there like, there's not a link yet if people want to donate, because we could plug that, and the handful of people.
Not yet. No, I'll have that up and running, and we can do a follow up or something, and we can talk about
sure.
that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen, dude. I mean, I had a couple pop culture questions I did want to ask you. We're at 90 minutes here. I don't want to keep you too long, but you are a guy who has like an unbelievable encyclopedic knowledge of just about anything, really. And when I decided to do this, I made a list of like 25 people that I don't want to call them dream guests because that sounds so corny, but right out of the chute, I made a list of 25 people that I've come in contact with. I mean, because if it's a dream list, Bob Dylan's on it and shit, and that's not realistic. But 25 people who I know enough to reach out via email or I've interacted with that I want to talk to, and you're on that list for.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, a lot of reasons. I mean, one, I just think you're one of the most brilliant thinkers I know. You are. No, but you really.
What do you say about Bramwell? He's up there, right?
No, and I hope he hears this. Bramwell's one of the most interesting people I've ever met. I think Bramwell has
he's a smart dude.
He's extremely
like a logical cut through the BS. Like, no, here's like bang bang bang. Here's your argument's flawed.
He's unbelievably book smart. He is one of the least common sense intelligent people I know. But he what's interesting about him is he's maybe evolved more than anybody I've known for 20 plus years in terms of his way of looking at the world, his ability to attack a problem. It's like I've watched his education change his brain more so than anybody.
I think he's a really open-minded guy. I've never met someone more open to like reason and the ability to entertain an argument and have that be like, okay, That makes
And
sense.
by the way, he's learned that. Like when we were young, he was extremely emotional. It fueled his athleticism. It also meant that he was like very quick to exit a conversation that he maybe didn't agree with you. But he's actually learned that. Like he's evolved almost more than any person I've known for that long a period of time.
I found out that he thinks Sammy Hagar Van Hagar is better than Van Halen, which I thought was just absolutely crazy. Like,
I don't feel like
anyone.
I don't think he's qualified to have that opinion.
Like where were we? We were at Tony Jarro's having greenies and Van Halen's Unchained or Hot for Teacher came on, and I'm banging the drum part, the double bass, and he made a comment like what's the best Van Halen song? He's like, how do I know this is love or something like that by Hagar? I'm like, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
Like you're joking.
Plus he's a little more sentimental too. Like I think he likes More Than Words by Extreme. I think that might be one of his top 5 songs too. So
that sounds terrible. But anyway. It's a good segue into the pop culture. So.
Yeah, what? So the best band of all time, in your opinion?
In my opinion, U2, and let me explain.
I knew you were going there, but
there's a tendency to believe that you can't possibly be experiencing the best thing contemporaneously with your life. The best baseball player, the best whatever is always someone who lived previous to you, right? It's the Mickey Mantle, or it's the Babe Ruth, or the best boxer was Muhammad Ali, or the best band Rolling Stones, and they are probably a second. But U2, I think, as a body of work, is just incredible. I've seen them 5 times, I think, and each time it's amazing. They have a different sound. They're not like, if you think of the Edge doesn't solo. There's no solos on any of the songs. The songs are rhythm driven, riff driven, and they have a different sound. It's not blues. It's not psychedelic rock.
Yeah, what is it?
It's almost like Celtic folk music with amps. And it just hit me when the first U2 song I heard was on the radio. It was Pride in 1985. And I loved it so much. And I'm like, John, who is this band? He's like, it's U2, man. And he played Sunday Bloody Sunday off the War album, and I was hooked.
I remember you. I think you had an Octoon Baby T-shirt. Did you?
I had when I was in 5th grade, I had a U2 Wide and Awake in America T-shirt. There's a picture of me playing violin, and I got it on. Yeah.
Can you play a bunch of U2 songs on guitar?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, it's fun. And the stuff that I bought is geared towards learning his sound. I bought a Vox AC-15. He plays an AC-30. It's a bigger amp, but it's still that same.
Is it right there?
Yeah, it's right over here.
I mean, I've got a couple minutes.
All right, I'll get up. I'll play you something. This wasn't planned, by the way, right?
No, of course not. I don't plan anything. Do I lead a life that looks like a guy who plans shit?
Can you hear this? It's probably going to be too loud. John's going to come up here and go nuts.
No, it's not going to be too loud. It's going to be fine. You taught yourself, right? This is all self-taught?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
So I'll give you a little tutorial here. We'll do Where the Streets Have No Name.
Are you going to plug it in or no?
Can you hear that?
Yep. That sounds great.
Okay. So let me get the delay right. Hold on. Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay.
All right.
That's not if you can see me, but so if I don't have the delay effect on, it's just a clean tone of the reverb, and it just sounds, the chord sounds like this. And he just goes. And he plucks these strings. And I think that's a D and a D sus4. So anyway, then he hits a delay effect. This is what you get. So that same note has an echo. And so if you get the rhythm right and you pluck them at the same rate, you get this kind of galloping effect.
That is awesome.
And it goes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chaz.
That's basically it.
Dude, that gave me some goosebumps.
Yeah. By the way, I hate doing that.
Why?
It's so tacky. It's the dude in the dorm who's like, with all the
I don't
girls
think
around,
so.
you're drinking beer, smoking weed, and some guy breaks out the sixth string, and you're like, talk about it more than words extreme. And he's gonna do that crap, that ding ding and bang the.
See, I think you have the wrong impression of that. That maybe if we were in our 20s, but at this age, there's a novelty to it that,
No,
and like I'm past the point of giving a
it's
fuck.
this BS.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Who wants that crap?
Me and Bramwell do. That's fantastic. It's
Bramwell
amazing.
just feel like.
Yeah, Bramwell could sing that song pretty good too. He has a good singing voice.
I tried to get him in the band. He doesn't want to do it, so
Really?
I don't know. We'll see.
What kind of band are you going to put together? I mean, you're going to be a guitarist and a vocalist, or no? Are you not a vocalist?
Yeah, I like lead guitar. I like Noel Gallagher and Oasis.
Okay.
Guitar, lead guitar, songwriter. Maybe sing one song or two. I don't know. Singing and playing guitar at the same time is really hard.
Yeah, I know. I'm taking guitar lessons, and it's like it's comical.
You should stop and take bass lessons, and then you could be in the
your band. Okay. Yeah. Well, let me just get the basics down here first, and whatever. You've been talking about starting a band for 25 years.
It's
maybe longer.
Yeah, it's something I definitely want to do, and if I can play live in front of 5 people at like a turf club bar, then I'll do it. I absolutely want to do it more than anything, more than politics, more than making a lot of money.
That's your number. So that if you could do anything with your life going forward, and you could snap your fingers and
make a living.
Well, you got to make a living, I guess. So if you could do anything with your time, let's assume you have enough money that you're not worried about generating revenue. You just want to. What would you spend your time doing?
Learning music, writing music.
Interesting.
All kinds. I'm learning to play the piano. I'm learning chords on the piano. I started out playing violin because my parents forced me. I thank them for that. I think all children should be forced to play an instrument because I think it's like eating vegetables. I think in the long run, it's good for you. I'm really starting now to really understand the instrument, music theory, why chords go together, why there are, intervals, and why, what makes a C chord and and why do certain melodies sound nice? Why
is it that you're understanding that now? Are you doing more reading, or is it just intuitively you're figuring
the internet? The internet.
Okay.
Now you can go on YouTube and you can find some great teachers like, who can explain this stuff to you. Rick Beato, Beato, is fantastic. He's a producer in Atlanta, and he just, he'll go through, all right, today we're going to talk about, borrowed chords, which would be a chord that isn't in the key that you're in. So if you're in C major, right, your chords are C, A minor, or C, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B augmented, or whatever, B diminished, and then C again. So like they would say, you can't play any chord outside this key, otherwise you're not going to be in key. And it's like, no, that's true, but there's borrowed chords, so you can play a chord outside that because it kind of fits in with the other ones, and all that stuff is just opening up a world of like being able to put together chord progressions that are much more complicated than your standard 1-4-5.
Yeah. So does that? And you're speaking over my head, but I've just in the lessons I've taken over the last 6 months, it's like I can understand fragments of what you're saying enough to understand the gravity of what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? I can't understand what you're saying, but I get the gravity of what you're saying. Has that led you down a path of pursuing different kind of music Does different kind of music appeal to you now that you're, or artists now
I've
that you're
always,
seeing this?
all different sorts of music has appealed to me. Like I could easily see myself in there's certain things that I don't like to play. I'm not a folk guy. I don't like jam bands. I don't like heavy metal. And I don't like country. I could do like New Order type of like, or Fat Boy Slim, Chemical Brothers, like kind of like guitar based EDM sort of stuff.
Interesting.
I could do a really just guitar driven rock group. I could I could totally be in a band like a new wave synth band. I mean, that would work too. Like,
do you ever write? Have you written any original music?
Not a full song, but I've definitely got a lot of different riffs and chords and things work together. And lyrics, I don't really sit down and write lyrics.
See, I feel like it. The way you write on Facebook and how passionate you are about the things that you do write about.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about Bono and the political undertones to his songs. You could write some really like influential political songs, and you got to use metaphors and innuendo. You just can't come out with, COVID-19 references.
Well, I
you
have
have to be a little more creative.
I have this one lyric called like the lyrics like something like who's the rebel now, and that's rooted off of the whole like what does it mean to be punk now? It seems like conservatism, being religious, is kind of punk. It's not the norm. And maybe there's a song there like
John 3.
I don't want to conform. Like you're a conformist. You look like every other weirdo in Uptown. You all have the same look.
Yeah.
There's nothing interesting about what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
and now you're the toxic enemy. You could write songs about toxicity.
Right. I'm the we're the counterculture. So.
Yes. There's your song.
There's a song for the counterculture. That's track one.
So if you're in a band, or are you just in a cover band? You're just doing covers? Is that what you want to do?
I think you have to learn to do covers to learn how to play, and it's harder than you think. Keeping rhythm's harder than you think.
Yeah.
But I want to get to the point where I'm writing original stuff. What amazes me about music is, and everyone knows this from when they hear a song, there's a hook. There's some change in the pitch going from when they call intervals. So like a C to a C sharp is a minor second. That's the first interval going up the scale on a keyboard, right?
Okay.
In guitar, it's a half step on the fret.
Okay.
That sound, dude.
Half step on a fret. You mean you don't go up a full fret? Like
Oh yeah, I mean it's a half step. It's one fret.
Okay.
That's a half step.
Okay.
So if you're on C and you play the note right next to it, that's a C sharp.
Okay.
That sound from a C to a C sharp, or a E to an F, or an A to an A sharp / B flat, whatever you want to call it, that sound is the sound of the Jaws theme. Dun-dun,
right.
Dun-dun, dun-dun, dun-dun. And so that interval, that sound from a root to the minor second, has a certain sound and it has a certain feeling.
Yeah, there's emotion for sure attached to it.
Right. And there's the same thing between the tonic and the perfect fifth, which is what chords are made. That's the grand bum 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 bum. And you sing at the same time, and it's just like bang, and that's all 3-chord Green Day rock is just fifths.
I love that shit. I love that shit.
And you'll start to realize when you're really listening to music, you'll find out that like, okay, this is going where my ear wants to go a certain way, and then they'll go where your ear wants to go, and you're like, that's exactly where I wanted the song to go, And they did that because there's something about our psyche.
Yeah, there's math to it too, right? Isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
like, where do we want to go with this, So, but yeah, music's fascinating. I've been kind of a weird music snob ever since, like I said, I wore that shirt when I was in 5th grade.
Yeah. No, I knew that about you, but I remember playing violin with you, and I remember you telling me that you had taught yourself, there's something genius about being able to teach yourself and all this stuff.
I didn't teach myself violin.
No, but you didn't learn all of this musical theory from 4th grade, 5th grade violin or 6th, did you? I mean, this is all stuff that you've pursued on your own.
when I was learning the violin, it was Suzuki method. It was 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes,
You know.
but Chuck, your ability to retain information is different than most people. It just is. I mean, listen, it's not like I've been in a basement in Robbinsdale for 40 years. I've lived all over the country. I've traveled. I've been around some of the smartest people in the world. Some of, people that have made tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars. Your ability to retain information is next level. It just is. And I think anybody who knows you would say that.
My only
It's really interesting.
The only discouraging fact is it's like, is age going to be a factor? Like, who starts a rock band at 43? I don't know, but maybe.
Yeah, not too many people, but also like, I mean, that's another interesting thing about you, and we'll wrap this up. But one of the things I did actually want to ask you about is what influence your dad having you at 42 has done in terms of creating a blueprint for you that makes you comfortable, sort of maybe being single still at your age and pursuing things like this at this age. There are a lot of people who I think feel like at 42, 43, they wouldn't even entertain that idea. And it's not because they don't have the thoughts, it's because they're already prisoners to the perception of what their life should be. I mean,
yeah,
I think there's something really admirable about being your age and single and openly pursuing things like this and not afraid to be comfortable enough in your skin to say it. And I'm wondering if your dad having you at 42 years old created sort of like the paradigm or the blueprint.
You're assuming it's by choice. I'm not discounting the idea that if I would have found somebody at 26, I wouldn't have just flat out married him and gone and bought a house in Maple Grove.
Right.
I'm not opposed to that lifestyle. In fact, sometimes I envy it. We are where we are. I'm reading Marcus Aurelius Meditations, or I read it, and I kind of buy into that stoicism philosophy that life does what it does, and you are where you are, and you make the best of it, and that's is what it is. To your point about my dad, he was not the type of guy who, when he was younger, said, I want to get married and settle down. He just didn't even think about that until he met my mom, and he was 33 years old. Mm. Like I go, did you ever think about like getting married, having kids? Was that like on your radar, like something you had to do? He's like, no, never even, no. In fact, they got married in 67. My brother was born in 69. He's 8 years old, older than me.
Right.
My mom jokes I'm kind of like a half mistake. Like she pulled a fast one on the old man, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Shooting for a daughter.
She was.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, I guess.
Do you want to have a family? I mean, do you think about?
Yeah, I'd like to at some point, but that's a question that you say when you're 30, or 20. Yeah, I'd like to. Nowadays, I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah, it might not be
I'm not opposed to it. I'm not. If it happens, it happens. Right now, I want to do. It's nice to have the freedom to say if I, want to do this band thing that I can go rehearse every night.
Yeah.
Not have to worry about a wife and kid at home and math homework and all that stuff. So that's.
Yeah, I mean that's the.
But on the flip side, it's it's not fun every night you come home from work and it's just you, and your dog. It gets old. Like you have all this time. It's like there's only so many YouTube cover tunes you can play, there's only, and then going out to the bars is kind of a waste of time and money and unhealthy. And so it's kind of like you need that social interaction. And usually it was, when all your friends were younger and only a handful were married, it was easy to find a crew to go out and have a good time. But now everyone's married and it's like, nah, so you're jonesing for those times when you call and you're like, I'm free tonight. You guys want to go out? I'm like, yes, let's go. I want to hang out with some people my age.
Well, I think about that even during this whole quarantine situation. It's like I've got 3 active kids that are span a decade and a house with a yard. And, as suffocating as that's felt, I've got no shortage of places to spend my energy and pass time. But I've thought about you and I've thought about Bramwell and some of my other friends who are single, essentially. And it's like when the bars are closed, and you're sort of restricted as to where you can go, I bet you've spent a lot of time in your own head, even more so than usual the last 3 months.
Yeah, and you touched on it earlier in the podcast here about where does all this encyclopedic knowledge come from? This broad range of interests and stuff like that. You got a lot of time on your hands. I'm not dealing with sick children, who have the flu, and a wife who's like, where you're so tuckered. I don't know what it's like to be tuckered out raising kids, and you just want to sit on a couch and watch Netflix. I don't know what that's like. I'm always on raring to go, because I'm done with work and I'm like, all right, now it's time to have a good time.
Right.
And I don't know what it's like I have a dog now. I guess that's a really bad approximation of what it's like to get up in the middle of the night, let the thing out to go to the bathroom, and I want to go to bed. And
no, it's an approximation. It's bad if you think it's a facsimile. That's where it becomes weird. It's an approximation.
It's good training. Yeah, it's not, but at least that's somewhat like, okay, I have some responsibility.
Yeah, but even what I would argue, that you actually have all the responsibility and none of the I shouldn't say none, but not a lot of the residual sort of benefits that you get with kids. Because as kids age and they start to interact with you and challenge things that you think, and they make you think in a different way, and they unlock a part of your brain that could only be unlocked by kids. Yeah. That's when you start to get something back that dog that shits and pisses, as much camaraderie as you feel or whatever, companionship, it really is limited. And you don't necessarily.
I can't communicate my wisdom and impart that on somebody who's a German short-haired pointer. That's not going to work.
No, I mean, their sincerity is inspiring, but they don't have any follow-up questions to John Hughes shit.
And that's kind of the sad, depressing thing about it is that, and people have kids, maybe they take this for granted, is like, you have a legacy. You have. It's almost like your trials and tribulations are not in vain. You can teach somebody. You can pass on that wisdom. You have the ability. Think about this. You have the ability to train a human being to go out and do good in the world.
It's an unbelievable level of responsibility, and actually, that responsibility is an unbelievable driving force in terms of, you talked about virtue and what's right. What that responsibility does to your focus on representing yourself in a certain way and making your actions match your words and all of the good things that you want to be. There is nothing like having a child and them being an extension of you, and them having to carry your name, really. And if you blow it, they've got to carry that burden.
I imagine you man up quite quickly.
Instantly.
When that happens.
Instantaneously.
There's no more sitting on the couch, scratching your nuts playing video games. It's like, all right, I got a human being I got to take care of.
Well, there may still be, but it doesn't come with a voice in your head that's going, okay, have you scratched enough today? Maybe balance this out with something more productive or whatever. I mean, it's incredible, dude. And anybody I love in my life, I encourage them to find a way to have children. It just because it makes you. It makes you whole in a way that can't be replicated by buying your first car or getting laid or all of these other things in your life that blow your mind when they happen. Pale in comparison to this. It's almost a supernatural feeling. And,
unless you write a hit sit and you're on stage in front of 60,000 in 2 years, then I'm going to be like, well, this is pretty cool too.
Yes. A hit song with political undertones.
If Jagger could do it at my mom's age at 78 or whatever the hell he's doing, I think I can start one up here at 43.
But also be the first. I mean, what the fuck? Like, that's the other thing is like, this one thing I try to implement into my kids or onto my kids is that don't compare yourself to anybody else. That's like a fool's game and a recipe for depression. You are literally made of shit that nobody else who's ever been born is made of. You might share 99.999% of your shit with people that have been born, but nobody's got 100% of what you have. So to measure yourself against anybody else or what they think or what timeline they were on or whatever standard is a bummer. You're selling yourself short. You literally are, because you are.
I believe that.
I mean, it's ridiculous to start a podcast. The world's got plenty of fucking podcasts. Honestly though, and it's like
there's only one Eric Stormont in the world.
Yes, but I have to tell myself that, and I have to get a certain joy out of it. But if I listen to anybody outside of my mom and my grandma, this is stupid. It's corny. Nobody really listens. I mean, nobody's going to listen, but it's like there's something about it that makes sense in my brain, which is the only version of me, of that kind of brain that exists. So it's like, fuck it. I don't know, dude. Start a band at 43 and be a rock star by 50. Who fucking cares? I understand the odds are long. Of course they are. But it wouldn't be,
But the odds aren't long to play live and to write something original. And if one person has a better 3 minutes of their day having listened to it, then that's great.
Well, more important than that, do you get anything out of it? Because at the end of the day, it's like you got to spend your time doing something, nourishing yourself in some way or another. If it does something for you, it'd be cool if we all could live in a space where, I'm not talking about selfishness. I'm talking about like being so comfortable in the pursuit of our own joy that we're not simultaneously measuring it against what people think. And it's very difficult, especially in this day and age when social media is, leaves you ripe for criticism, even when you're not trying to create a shitstorm. But if you can just do it for yourself, it's fucking empowering, man. It really is. And I don't know, it's difficult, but I don't know.
You got to read Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. That's all he talks about is be yourself, ignore the critics. You are put on this planet to do a job, basically. Everyone has their duty station, and you have to do it. So
how do you recognize what that is? Does he tell me? Or
no, you live through your action. You live. You got to read it, man. It's only 150 pages.
All right, I'll read it. I'll read it. We'll do a book report on it. Do a book report podcast on it. I mean,
yeah.
Maybe we'll pipe in Bramwell or somebody and get a three-way thing going. Because I also want to talk to you, and we won't do this tonight because I wouldn't do justice to it, but I want to talk religion with you because I've had periods in my life when I'm religious. There are certain components of religion that I love. There are certain lessons in religion that I think are vital. But it's always interesting to me when I see somebody who I consider to be extremely intelligent, also so religious. And there aren't a lot of people like that, in my opinion. A lot of the people that are really religious or pro, Jesus or the Bible, they're usually, in my opinion, not the most intelligent. So it's all, but that makes it interesting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. So I would like to have a conversation that would do justice, and I don't think at the 2-hour mark that we will. So let's leave that on the table for next time, and then I'll read that book and we'll do it again, and maybe around the time that you're firing up the Chaz.
We'll have Chaz. That'll be going. So
okay, all right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. This is fun. So
that was a good time. Was that you had 2 questions? Did we cover them?
The other one was about John Hughes and movies, but
come on, we got to end with that.
Okay, do you want just give me the best John Hughes movie and whether okay, and I was gonna say whether it is the greatest movie of all time in your opinion, but I don't even know if that's necessary. Just give me I know where John Hughes ranks in your psyche. So what's the best John Hughes movie and why?
I think the best movie he made. That's tough. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is good as a film. Okay?
Surprises me.
But he's known for his high school movies and comedies and stuff like that. I actually think The Breakfast Club is a really wonderful piece of Americana, and it speaks to all of these different, archetypes of high school students. We were all one of those 5 persons to some degree. And
at that time period too. Now it seems a little.
At that time period.
Yeah.
But what the movie does is it shows that basically they're kids and they have the same problems, and they're innocent. They're not as edgy as you think. Like you look at it now, and kids are crazy compared to like what they were talking about in that movie. But the movie is just a good analysis of the difficult time in high school where status is everything. I mean, you think status matters now. I mean, think in high school, right? Like no one knows who you are until you make the basketball team or you're on the baseball team and all of a sudden people know my name. I mean, how stupid is that?
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Right.
I could throw a piece of wound leather, and maybe I hit 80 miles an hour and get some guys to strike out, and all of a sudden I'm an interesting person. That's kind of arbitrary.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the Breakfast Club pulled out is like, the
ridiculousness
of you're pretty or you're smart or you're, a good wrestler or whatever. That's not really what makes you special. It's,
what else is brilliant about it was the simplicity of the set. I mean, it's almost like a theater production in that it's almost one stage for the whole fucking thing. And so I
think that's how he sold the movie. I think he had written a bunch of movies he wanted to direct. And I think he said, if I can shoot it in one setting,
it's incredible,
then I'll get approved.
Yeah. And by not changing,
cheap to make.
That would make sense. And you know what? There's a rewatchable podcast that Bill Simmons does. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
You know what Bill Simmons is? So Bill Simmons is a sports writer who's now has his own, podcast network that he just sold to Spotify for like $300 million, by the way. So he does the Bill Simmons.
You're on your way, dude. That's going to happen for you.
Anyway. That'd be great. I think we're dealing with a pretty crowded market at this point, but he got in early, like in the late 2000s. And anyway, part of the Ringer Network is what he started. One of the podcasts that they produced, I think on a weekly basis, is called The Rewatchables. And it's him and a couple other really funny, brilliant writers who rewatch movies of bygone times and break them down and break down how they relate now and how it holds up and what things are ridiculous. And they did a Breakfast Club rewatchable. That's actually pretty interesting to listen to. And it talks about all that stuff. And, one of the brilliant things John Hughes was on another level, obviously, but one of the cool things is when you have a set that doesn't change, what it does is it brings the character subtleties forward, right? There's not a bunch of explosions and scene changes.
Right. Yeah. There's no slips on the banana peel. It's a dialogue movie. It's almost like a one-act play kind of a thing. Like,
it's almost like you're on the couch. You're like a fly on the wall, and you get sucked into this conversation. It's fucking, in a lot of ways, it's kind of what long-form podcasts, the reason they appeal to people. But I mean, this is 25, 30 years ago. The guy was incredible. It was incredible.
Yeah. That's the best movie.
You have to watch it. You have to listen to that rewatchables because they dug up some information on casting decisions and how Molly Ringwald almost didn't get that part, or she read for the angry girl part first, and how that was a last minute switch, and I don't know, some interesting stuff on it. So, all right, appreciate it, man. Nobody knows pop culture better than you, music, politics. Honestly, dude, you're a resource. So I'll have you back on. We'll do it again. Hopefully we can generate some funds for your campaign and shit too. So
that'd be fun. I'll have that set up, and then we could talk. I'm excited about the religion thing because we can get into that later, but I'm terrible at evangelism and converting people. So
that's what makes you approachable. I mean, there's no bigger turnoff.
That's why I'm like, I'm terrible at that. So
that's okay. That's what makes people unapproachable is if they're preaching. Nobody wants to have a conversation with somebody who's trying to convert them. I mean, what the fuck? Yeah. I mean, I don't want you to sell me. Don't sell me anything. Ever.
Believe me, I'm not good at it.
Don't sell me on iPhones. Don't sell me on anything. I can't stand that shit. I will reject you on principle. So, all right. Tell John. Thanks for letting us jam late night.
Yeah. It'll be fun. Yeah. He won't care.
All right. I'll let you know when I post it.
Man.
See you, Chaz. Much love, man.
Bye. Yep. Bye.
Slab Content Company.